Yeah? Okay. Ready?
Okay. Hello everyone, thank you for coming. It's really nice to be holding a full festival after a couple of years due to the pandemic. So I'm just going to start off by introducing our guests today. We've got Mel Mullins, who is a train driver. She's Secretary of the Black Solidarity Committee and Vice President of RMT London Transport Regional Council and Secretary of the Black and Ethnic Minority Advisory Committee. We've also got Delia Mattis from the Black Lives Matter movement. She's also one of the key organisers in the Kill the Bill campaign and the Coalition of Nationality and Borders Bill. Of course, we will hear from them as well. So as most of you know, as Day-Mer Youth, we organise a panel each year under the umbrella of the Day-Mer Festival, which is now in its 33rd year. We sat down and thought about what our theme could be for this year. As always, there's a plethora of issues that we could have spoken about, plethora of issues for the working, migrant and ethnic minority communities. We often have a few different ideas. It takes us a bit of time to decide what we're going to focus on this year. Strangely, it depends on what side you look at it from, fortunately or unfortunately, it was really clear that one thing stood out to us this year, that being the cost of living crisis and the impact that it has on our communities, that being a very important section that we're going to focus on. The cost of living is a crisis that unfortunately not all people get affected by it. It is particular parts of our communities that are impacted by it. Just last week, it was announced that inflation has hit a 40-year high and currently stands at 9%. Energy bill increases have seen an almost 73% increase and rent at an 11% rise. I'm sure many of us have also noticed a significant change in how much we pay when we go to do our grocery shopping. Yeah, we pay more, but we actually end up bringing home less and less, and this is probably going to get worse. Despite all of this, we are continuously seeing barbaric cutbacks from the Tory government. This is not the end, unfortunately. When workers try to seek a rightful pay increase, they are almost demonised for this. As a teacher myself, we have been offered a 3% pay rise by the government, which does not match the current inflation rates. And I know that my union, the NEU, is looking to hold an indicative ballot in the autumn of this year. RMT have rightfully demanded a 7% pay increase and have taken strike action over this. We will hear more about this from Mel herself, who's kindly joined us today. There's something that I vividly remember seeing posted somewhere about on Google. If you look at the amounts of searches joining a union, it's increased in the past few weeks. So it's a good thing. We want people to be unionised, but it shouldn't have to take such drastic measures for people to see this. It simply shows us the importance and the power of being unionised and organised. Again, for the past 12 years, the Tory government has imposed cruel cuts and austerity measures on the public. With the pandemic, the scale of these measures has taken its toll on the most vulnerable in our society, and the pandemic is being used as an excuse to turn around and say, we have to do this, we have no other choice. From workers to students and migrants to black and ethnic minority communities, the cost of living crisis is pushing more people into deepening poverty. Meanwhile, the government continues to heighten its hostile environment policies on migrants, refugees seeking safety and their descendants. The timing of our panel is very significant, as it was Windrush Day last Wednesday. Yet again, another example of how the government has not learnt from its past failures and how the Home Office has failed to turn to a more compassionate route. We also saw a stabbing this week of Ali Baigoran, aged 17. He was stabbed outside of his home this week, and knife crime and gang-related violence is common in deprived communities like us. We hear it so often, especially in areas of high deprivation and poverty. Many young people, particularly those from working class, ethnic minority and deprived communities, are more exposed to knife crime violence than other sections of society. The closure of youth centres, the rise of betting shops is no surprise, and it's a direct result of government policy. If you just walk 30 seconds down the road, just on Tottenham High Road, there's maybe 5 or 6 betting shops, and where are the youth centres? Where are the opportunities for young people? Many young people are on the streets, all betting shops, then youth centres, which used to be a safe place, but unfortunately not many of those exist anymore. The Tory government's austerity measures, even before the pandemic, left the poorest children and young people relying on food banks and with few social opportunities. On top of all of this, we now, as we've said, face a 40-year high of inflation, which cannot and should not continue. That is my introduction, thank you. I'm now going to pass over to Mel. I'll just remind you all that she is a train driver, Secretary of the Black Solidarity Committee, Vice President of RMT London Transport Regional Council, and Secretary of the Black and Ethnic Minority Advisory Committee. Amazing stuff, so I'll just pass over to you. Thanks for joining us.
Greetings all, and thank you very much for inviting me here to address you all. I suppose everyone's been affected in some way or another with the strikes that have been going on over the last couple of months. Now, this is the time that we have finally been able to have a voice separate from the narrative that has been put out there, telling us that we're greedy, we just want more pay, etc., etc. I think it's quite boring to keep on ploughing that narrative over and over, and I think it's time for us to always think about, the members of society that are always marginalized, that don't have a voice, that the narrative is actually pinning down. So the reason why I am the Secretary of the Black Solidarity Committee is because of the fact that it is for Black solidarity. We are at 40% density in our union, and without us, there is no union, right? And that needs to be clear. Our members need to be respected. Our members need to be able to have a voice. And that's what I've been challenged to do, and that's what I'm trying to do. Now, in terms of, I'm just gonna give you a few points. In terms of the national rail strikes, I'm London Underground, so they're separates, but I'm gonna just try and make it very simple because I was on strike on Tuesday, right? And our strikes are not just based on the fact that these cost of living crisis is really, pinning us down. It's because our terms and conditions are being stripped away. It's because we're being asked to do a lot more for a lot less. We're asked to be part of this situation where they can just strip away 600 members of staff on our stations. Now, I proudly started London Underground on the stations in 2001, right? There was headhunting, I should say, not in a bad way, in a good way, for people that look like us to join the underground. That was back in 2000/2001. And when I started the job, it was a job for life, right? A lot of us believed that we could forego university, that we could go into the underground and it was a job for life. Our pensions would be secure. We would have a career that we could look forward to as working class people. So we could have a decent wage. We can look forward to, good housing prospects, probably buy a house one day, etc., etc. All of that is taken away from us, right? I've got members of staff who are on train operator salary. I'm speaking from that, and then I'm going to go into stations, right, who cannot afford to buy a property in London. They're being forced out of London, right? And I say forced because it takes a village and a community to raise children. If you're being somebody of what we call ethnic minority background, and now you've put a base in London and now you're being forced out of it, you're put into situations where a lot more people don't look like you, and maybe there's a different circumstance. So people can live where they like, people can do what they like, but at the same time, you're trying to build a community, you've had this job, and all of a sudden your terms and conditions are being stripped away from you. So there was an audit done recently where the government was tasked to do a review on pensions, and they've tried to say all kinds of stuff about the fact that they need to save because of the pandemic. Well, we worked through the pandemic. We kept London going. Our cleaners are still not being given an in-house contract, yeah? And our Sodoxo members of staff who are for our catering staff, they were threatened with redundancy, right? And we had to fight against those cuts from the very beginning. So our terms and conditions are being torn away. In terms of the depot, my depot has lost 10% of its workforce already. And we were just handed that edict. Oh, here you go, we're gonna do away with 10% of your staff. So when you see us losing pay, we're actually fighting with the anti-trade union laws. We've actually got a mandate and we're going out there and making our voice heard. Believe me, we've tried to do it the correct way, and we've also been forced, our hands have been forced, right? I wanted to speak quickly about our ethnic minority members and our black members, right? I see a lot of women who are either on very low salaries, they're taking part-time positions so that they can look after their children. And what has happened, because there are less opportunities on the stations, instead of being able to have a sideway move, which is to have somewhere maybe closer to home. When you first start the underground, you might not know where you're going to be put, because it's the underground, it's wherever, you put wherever. And once your family becomes something that you have to dedicate your time to, you can imagine me travelling all the way from South London all the way to Amersham. And we've got a member of staff here who does that journey actually. When I've got 3 children, and I've had all of my children since I've been on the underground. And I have had a fantastic time of it. My oldest son is 18 years old. I was able to just go to the nearest station and do a part-time spot until it was time for me to go full-time. We don't have any of those opportunities anymore. So as well as being a black woman who are very, very invisible when it comes to statistics and the way that their rights are protected, now we've got a situation where they're told that they have to demote themselves. So they've got qualifications that they could have gone on to do managerial positions. They don't have part-time managerial positions. So now you have to go down to station level, which is a lot less money, right? And also you're talking about lone working, right? Now, our country's unprecedentedly seen a lot more racism going on, open racism. There's a lot of attacks. We've also got the disputes against night tube. Now, night tube does not protect members of staff. It's a very difficult place to be when people have had a jolly up, and they're a bit inebriated and so on and so forth, and they let their insults fly, right? And you've gone through the stations and you've seen lone women working on those stations. It's not a fun place to be. I used to have loads of members of staff to be able to cover me if I needed to and assist. Now it's not the same. So in terms of the national rail strikes, we're talking about a density of 40,000 members who have gotten their collective mandate, right? That is an unprecedented, in 30 years, a national strike, And I really want to put my solidarity out there to my colleagues who have stood up and said, no more pay freeze, we need a pay rise. And that is their right to demand that. And it is for us, like I said, to forget about the narrative that is being put out there in the media and support it. And I will take any questions. I'm sure there's a lot more that I can say, but please, please support our strikes, support what we're demanding, because we deserve it. Trust me, we deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, and we'll definitely have time for questions as well. I'm just going to hand over to Delia now. Just again, a reminder, she is from the Black Lives Matter movement. She's also one of the key organisers in the Kill the Bill campaign and the Coalition of Nationality and Borders Bill. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I feel like saying hello again. I'm here quite often nowadays. I feel like this is like home away from home at this point. I've adopted Day-Mer into part of my family now. I think we've been working together very closely this year, so I think I'm qualified in saying that. It's nice to be here, and it's nice to be a part of the festival. I'm looking forward to the crescendo, the next week's festival in Clissold Park. It's my first time, and I'm sure it's going to be amazing. I hope we get the crowds. I hope we've got the weather similar to today. I think that's going to be really positive. And one of the most positive things is seeing communities working together in this way. I think it's been a long time coming. When you've got Black Lives Matter being proud to share a platform with our Turkish and Kurdish community over here, I think that's a really positive thing, and we should look to do more of that. Cost of living crisis. I've been doing a lot on this because I've been part of the People's Assembly campaign who've put on some of the big actions in the UK about this issue. One of the things that we've seen is that we don't really have a lot of ordinary community people coming to those campaigns when we have it in the city. And we have to think about why. Because of the basic reasons that some people can't really afford the tube fare to get into central London now because things are so tough. If you think about people who have been living on the breadline before COVID, and then COVID happens and then you lose your job, and then you have to jump through hoops to get benefits, and you know it's getting harder and harder in this country to claim something that you should just be able to have. Like, I think welfare should be welfare for everyone. And then we've got COVID, and then we've got this cost of living hike with the energy prices going up around 70%. How are people coping with this? How do you cope with that? It's depressing. I live on an estate. I speak to my neighbours. They tell me how depressing it is for them, you know, actually deciding whether to pay a bill or buy food. That's the reality. But, you know, we've got the cost of living crisis, but there's other crises as well. And I think that we shouldn't separate the issues that we are facing from this government. We've got a full-on onslaught. This is an attack on working class communities. And it's not just with the cost of living, it's with every other thing that they're doing as well. You know, it's the most insidious types of policies that are coming out. And it's no accident that they're all coming out together. So we've got the police bill, the police crime sentencing and courts bill, where the government is actively trying to stop ordinary people from protesting against the injustices that we face, protests that we've been doing for hundreds of years. And then we've got the absolutely disgraceful Nationalities and Borders bill. Now, you remember the big upset we had when Windrush scandal first came out, when they were deporting people that should have had British citizenship and fooling people. They've actually destroyed their paperwork, and they're sending them home to find it and telling them, if you don't bring this paperwork, we're going to deport you. And now they've got the Nationality and Borders bill, and if you read it, if you read clause 9, it's evil. It's actually an evil, racist, fascist government policy that's going to strip people of their citizenship. And then at the same time, they allow this energy hike and inflation hike at the same time of all these things. And people, you know, you can't get to organise people in ordinary working class communities because they've got issues coming from all over. They don't know which one they should fight, and they don't know if it's going to make it worse for them. And then they're afraid if they start protesting, they're going to get arrested by the police. It's not by accident, it's by design. And I think what we've got to do now is mobilise on all of those issues, on all fronts, all of the times. Because if we just campaign on one issue, then some parts of our community are going to feel like they are being left behind. We've just heard from the RMT, and I think what they are doing at the moment is absolutely amazing. It has affected some of us. I had to come home a day early because I would be affected by the train strike. And the government narrative that you see in the media is just so typical, isn't it? It's just so typical. They try to avoid the issue. They're asking, what's his name? Mick Lynch. They're asking Mick Lynch, are you a Marxist? Are you a revolutionary? You know, as if that's the issue. It's not, is it? The issue is they're taking away people's terms and conditions, and that's what they're on the streets fighting against. And I think, hopefully, we've heard that the NEU are doing some indicative ballot in the autumn. Hopefully, more unions can take this opportunity and have some bravery and get out on them streets and join unions like the RMT. They're leading the way, and other unions should be joining forces and making, you know, history, because the time is right. And actually, you know, RMT strikes are normally quite unpopular. They're normally quite unpopular because, you know, they put people, you know, it's difficult for people, they make it difficult, people get to work and things like that. But the support from ordinary people, you can see on social media, it has actually been amazing. Mitch Lynch is trending on social media, it's become so popular. So the time is right. But I think we can't just rely on the trade unions. And we should never do that, actually. There's trade unions, there's community organisations, there's community. I think it's time for everybody to join forces around this issue. People in communities don't realise their power, and it's okay. We understand it. They've been beaten down by the system for years and years and years, and it's demoralising, it's depressing. But it's for us, you know, if you have the capacity to take to the streets and mobilise against this cruel fascist government, then we should do that. And that's how we show community members solidarity. Sometimes when you're in your own little bubble on your own, you hear these words, you don't really know what it means. But when we mobilise and they can see different campaigning groups and trade unions working together in unity, it means a lot for those at home that don't really have the capacity to get there. And I think that's what we need to start working on. I think all of us need to be building. I think we need to speak to the trade unions and just say, it can't be just your dispute. It should be the disputes that all of us have in our communities and join forces in that way. And we've seen it done. I mean, last year in March, we called the Kill the Bill. That's a photo from one of our protests up there. I don't know if it's in London, probably. It seems like it. It was just grassroots campaigners, organisers that got together and decided that we wanted to campaign against the government. And we organised, set up social media and called a national day of action, and 52 cities went out and protested in the streets. So if we get that kind of energy with trade unions and other really established organisations, I think it could be a powerful thing. But I think all of the organisations, we have to know each of us have a place. Nobody's born to rule or lead. You know, it doesn't have to be trade union bureaucracy leading all the time, and we shouldn't wait for that either. And furthermore, our youth, they've seen a different type of campaigning now. Since 2020, when BLM had an uprising that was global, people just took to the streets, COVID or no COVID. And so young people, they're not going to wait for trade union bureaucracy to make decisions. When it's time to get out on the streets, we just need to be out there, and we all need to be supporting each other. So that's my answer to the cost of living crisis and all of the other issues that we're facing at the same time. We have a voice, and we are powerful in numbers. And if we join forces and stick together, I think we can defeat the government. But we also have another problem, don't we? Because we've got the government, which is the most right-wing government of our time, of my life, make Thatcher look like a pussycat, don't they? But then what about the opposition? And we have to be honest about that. What about the opposition? We don't have one. We've got a leader of the opposition that's whipping his MPs not to join picket lines. It's a disgrace. The Labour Party that was born on the back of the trade union, well, it is the trade union party. That's what it is. And then you've got a feckless, useless leader who offers nothing to working class communities. He came out waving the Union Jack, as if that can feed people, as if working class communities are stupid. Waving that flag doesn't feed people, and that's all he's got. I don't know, I haven't heard a single thing from Keir Starmer or his ilk that says we support and we will defend working class communities. Nothing at all. And I think it's time for our communities to get a little bit more politically savvy. I think if we have been going along with a system for many, many years, and that system has consistently been failing us, why should we continue to go along with it? We shouldn't. I think there's a third way, and I think if people in the Labour Party can't represent our communities the way that we demand them to, because we put them there, the way that we demand, if they can't respond to those demands, then we should get rid of them. That's simply what we need to do, get rid of them. We have to be sort of selfish in a way, but in a collective way. We have to start voting for our own interests. I mean, I don't see the difference in a Keir Starmer government than a Boris Johnson or a Priti Patel government. What's the difference? They're both for austerity, they're both for privatisation, they don't support the unions, they don't support community action. So what is the difference? I think there's a third way, and I'll be interested to continue working with Day-Mer and talk about how we build on that, because given what we experienced this year in Edmonton, and given that actually in a 4-week campaign, hundreds of people went out and voted for 2 unknown independent people, I think that is very, very, very telling. And it's for all of the issues, you know, that we have just been discussing. It's about the cost of living crisis. It's about not being represented by the powers that be. And if the powers that be don't represent us, take away their power and let's try a third way. Thank you for having me in solidarity, everybody.
Thank you very much for that. I've just got 2 quick questions, and then we will hear from other people that might want to ask some questions. Dila, you touched upon, you know, the in Edmonton and working with people, and people voted for 2 independent candidates. And I know that you spent a lot of your time canvassing and directly speaking with people. I just want to ask you, you know, what is it that the people say, or if you've got any interesting experiences and stories from being directly speaking to people face to face, if there is anything there that you'd like to maybe just add on a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I mean, the thing is, I do lots of national campaigns, but the thing that's close to my heart is really local community. It's where you get to really hear what people want, what they're saying, what they think. I was in charge of the Labour Party council elections at the last local elections. And when you knock on doors for the Labour Party, or I suppose any party, you get cursed out on the street a lot and you get doors slammed in your face. That really didn't happen with this independent campaign. It didn't happen. The engagement was quite unbelievable. Not unbelievable, because I don't think you come up with an idea to do something like that if you don't think, you know, it's going to cut through. But it cut through in a way that was a surprise to a lot of people. The response was really amazing. And if you think about, if you go into a campaign, you go into a campaign to win, otherwise why go into the campaign? But you have to look back, when it's all said and done, you have to look at the numbers and you have to look at what we were able to do in 4 weeks, and it's quite unbelievable. It's quite unbelievable, and I can tell you now that the Labour Party is absolutely terrified, because they know what we now know. If we can do that in 4 weeks, what can we do in 4 months? What can we do in 6 months? What can we do in a year? And we need to be thinking like that, because I'm telling you, those numbers mean something. For hundreds of people to vote for 2 people they didn't know, 4 weeks. 4 weeks, they knew nothing, but had a message that absolutely centred community, and that's what has been missing from politics locally and nationally. It centred community. It focused on the issues that the community wanted us to focus on, and it cut through. And I think we've got to do more of the same, because if those people engage with us in that way, in that short period of time, they need more. That's what I think. I think the community needs more, and I think we need to be doing it on a bigger level. I think we need to be more organised. I don't see any no-go areas. Obviously, I think there needs to be targeted campaigns, but the people have responded. They have said, okay, we didn't know anything about you, but we're going to vote for you, because we clearly, our message was based on community, and I think it's a powerful message, and so we must. I don't think there's anybody here that thinks we're not going to do more of this. I'm sure most people here knows that we're going to do more. We have to, because people have responded to us. They want to see that, and that's what we're going to do.
Thank you very much. And my second question, because I don't want to take up time from anyone else that might want to ask questions. So Mel, with inflation, oh, my voice is going. So it's estimated to hit 11% in autumn, and prices are continuing to go up. I just want to sort of take your say on how should people approach their bosses? What should they demand, and how should they demand it across the working class community?
Thank you. fire and rehire has been going on for about a couple of years now, and it's been going on quietly. People have been going through a process. So the process was a redundancy process which takes about 60 days. And what the bosses had been doing is they've been sending it to people's emails, right? And I know this because BA staff and Virgin staff had this going on. And I think it was HSBC Bank staff had this going on as well. What I saw with, everyone probably knows about what happened with P&O, because they knew that the RMT as a union would definitely fight against the cuts that they were proposing. That's why they did what they did. And it was obviously a disgrace. It's a national disgrace, 800 people losing their jobs. Now, RMT did the right thing. We were unionized. We made sure that our terms and conditions were protected. We're organized very, very well. And then you come up with a situation where the government, their laws and their ways of being able to interpret law was enabled directors of a company to do things in a very unscrupulous way. So in terms of what we should be demanding, we need to do exactly what Dealer is saying. We need to re-engage with community politics. We need to get back our power base to be able to go through the political route. We need to change things in that way. Now, how can you have, with our national strikes, I said it was 40,000 people took part in that, and we passed the anti-trade union laws. That never translates with national elections, that never translate with local elections. And why is that? There are people who know politics. It is a bit of bureaucracy in terms of how you organize within a trade union, but that is politics. It mimics the way national politics runs. So there are people who are politically aligned, but they're not participating, and I'll tell you why. It's because the people are not representative. So if you want to get representation, you engage with people like Delia when they come knocking on the doors, and people like me. I've done a lot of door knocking for local elections as well, and you demand what you want, but you have to engage in politics. That's the only way you can get things changed, and then within your trade union movement, you have a much better base of power, and all of this narrative and this crazy stuff that you see going on, that, just like Delia said, our disputes are very unpopular because of the way they can spin the narrative. If we get more politically aligned and we have more support, they won't be able to spin that narrative any at all. So people need to go into their trade unions and demand that they, become more politically aligned. It doesn't matter which way you do it, whether you're aligned with an independent candidate or you demand from whatever party, right? And move from there. And organize really well and make sure that your people that are going forward and speaking are representative of your workforce that need to be represented the correct way. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Hello, yes.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ebony. I also work for the Underground as well. And what people need to remember is that we live in a capitalist society now with a capitalist government. We don't really care about the working class people of the United Kingdom. They only care about people of their own kind, which are rich, upper class people, millionaires, and they are the ones that they care about. And I think that the fact that we went on strike is part of, for me, it is part of the reason for going on strike, because at the end of the day, as things are getting more and more expensive, and although I'm not feeling the pinch, there are people within the rail industry who are feeling the pinch. They're so badly paid, it's unbelievable. I mean, some of these people are being paid less than £30 grand a year, and that's within the rail industry. So, the fact that we're going on strike means that people need to be paid better. The pensions need to stop being tampered with, because what they're basically saying to me is that as we get older and as we nearer retirement, we're going to be poorer. And people can argue that we get state pension, but that isn't even worth that's not even worth anything. So So that's the pensions, and then there's the work-life balance, and then there's the cutting numbers of staff as well, meaning that, you know, if you cut numbers, then you have fewer members of staff to do more work, which will then lead to sickness because then they'll get tired. So, not just tired, but they'll just end up getting sick because of the pressure. So, I know that, you know, that the strike annoyed a lot of people, it put a lot of noses out of joint, but at the end of the day, if the government and the company are not listening to us, then that is one of the ways that we can actually get them to listen to us. And if they continue to still ignore what we're saying, then we're just going to have to, it's going to get to the point where every single industry, not just the rail industry, but every single industry, and that's teaching, NHS, you name it, the whole country at some stage will be shut down because everybody of every industry that you could think of will go on strike.
I'm Carol, and I'm going to say something I'm saying increasingly in every meeting I go to. I'm probably the oldest person in the room, by a long shot, yes I am. And I'll be honest with you, I am feeling the pinch, but we don't want to talk about me. I want to tell you something that happened not so long ago. Somebody who was a rep rang me up and said, there is a woman, she's a cleaner, she's in the R&T, she doesn't want to talk to me, she wants to talk to you. She particularly asked to talk to you. So I said, all right, I'll do that. Not a million miles from here. Anyway, I spoke to this cleaner and she said to me, I've told my work that you're my aunt. As you look Middle Easternish, and I'm from the Middle East, I think they'll believe me. I'm afraid to speak, to be seen speaking to the R&T, because if they fire anybody, it may well be me. Now when you think about it, there was somebody, a good worker, a decent person, who had to meet me covertly. I mean, this is terrible. This wouldn't have happened 10 years ago, but it would have happened when I was very young, because I'm going to tell you another horrible story. When I was young, my mother said to me, you're grown up now, I was about 13, she said, I'm going to show you something, and you are grown up, aren't you? Yes, Mum. She said, come and look at these men. They were at Kilburn Station, and it was very, very cold, and they all had open shirts, and they were all, you know, standing there. They were waiting to get jobs on building sites. And the reason they had open shirts was to show they were strong. So, went in, Mum said, we're going to have coffee. That was the nice bit. She said, now we're going to do the horrible bit. And she said, let's go up the road and look. And there were women standing in doorways, and these women were wearing thin dresses, but they were very, very well made up. And Mum said, do you know why these women are here? And I said, well, I kind of know. And she said, these are the wives and the mothers and the daughters of all the men who didn't get jobs. And when we look how made up, do you know what they're going to have to do? I went, yes. So she said, that's why you have to one day fight for workers' rights. You have to join a union. You have to fight for justice. You've heard it from your dad a million times, now you're hearing. And let's hope that things get better. Well, they got much, much, much better. But now, okay, if poverty were a station, we may not all be seeing the trains, but we can certainly hear the whistles blowing in the background. So, for the sake of not only us, but the coming generation and the generation join a union.
Thank you very much for that. Just gonna ask if maybe Mel or Delia want to comment on anything, and then we will move on to the next set of questions. Yeah. Can we ask Paul if you'd like to?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to start just by offering solidarity. I'm Secretary of Haringey CUC and also President of Haringey National Education Union, and Day-Mer are one of, if not the most significant community organisation in Haringey, and we are trying to build links between the unions and the community organisations because we're all in the same fight together. And it was mentioned earlier by one of the speakers about the flack that the RMT are getting. And it's not just the RMT. When the NEU talks about balloting and likely balloting in October for strike, we were told it's disgraceful. And now, to be honest, there are lots of disgraceful things. It's disgraceful. There are 4 million children in poverty, and nearly 50% of children in Tottenham, with figures released last year during the pandemic, are in poverty. It's disgraceful when actually you have Boris partying, insulting the cleaners and security guards, and actually I worked it out. One of the parties was the day my sister died, her funeral, and we couldn't party, we couldn't even have a proper funeral. And actually when they insulted security guards and cleaners, well, my mum was a school cleaner and my dad was a security guard. That's disgraceful. It's disgraceful that they could stand up during the pandemic and we see Boris outside Downing Street clapping key workers. Whereas now, they're slapping key workers, the same people. And in the name of modernisation, I'll tell you what, if I had the money, I'd modernise my kitchen. I'd want it to look much nicer than it is now. But their idea of modernisation is to destroy the cooker, to pull out the goods and to smash the crockery, because that's what they're doing. Modernisation for them means cutting jobs, worsening conditions, making a worse service and cutting pay. And by the way, I don't think we should say inflation of 9.1%, it's not. That's the CPI version, which the government likes to use. There's another version called the RPI, and that includes things which the government say isn't important, like your housing costs, because none of you pay rent, and none of you have a mortgage. But if you include that, the inflation is not 9.1%, it's 11.7%, and that's actually the scale of the cuts they're talking about. And Delia talked about where to link to other issues. We do. It's disgraceful there's a climate emergency that they are cutting public transport. And let's be clear, the attacks on the RMT and London Underground and nationally are an attack on public transport. TfL right now consulting over the cutting of 16 bus routes in London. 16 bus routes. And what does that all mean? People being forced into cars. A worse climate emergency. It's disgraceful when they try and play the race car. You know when they're in trouble, actually what do? They look for scapegoats. You know, the Rwanda, the Nationality Act. And actually, I'll tell you what, in a society of Ferraris and food banks, where the Ferraris are getting more and the food banks are getting more, we shouldn't worry. We should welcome people coming on small boats. They shouldn't have to. And we should worry about people coming in on yachts. They're the ones that we worry about. Now, if I left it at that, it's just, well, it's miserable. Yeah? But it's not. Because there's hope. And the hope is this, and it's really clear. It was clear in the pandemic. In the pandemic, we discovered who are the key workers. We discovered who makes a difference. You know, we weren't clapping for the bankers during the pandemic. We weren't clapping for the people who in the city. We were clapping for the transport workers. We were clapping for the educators. We were clapping for the people who work in the shops, the refuse workers, the postal workers. Why? Because they are the people that keep society running, and they're also the ones that have the power to actually stand up against this government. Now, in the last few months, I've been involved in meetings on this issue. I expect many of us went on the march on June the 18th. So we've met together, we've marched together, now we're starting to see people strike. And actually, it's the RMT are striking now. Postal workers, probably next week, are going to start balloting. The civil servants have said that they're going to be balloting. The educators have said they're going to be balloting. It's likely the bus workers will be balloting very soon locally. And actually, we have to show that we support each other on this. My favourite film, I'm going to finish on this, one of our favourite films of all time, is a film called Spartacus. I don't know if people have seen it. And in Spartacus, it's the story of a slave revolt. And against the Roman Empire. And at the end of the film, the slaves have been defeated, they've been captured. But they don't know who Spartacus is. They don't know what he looks like. And they say to all the other slaves, if Spartacus hands himself over, you won't get crucified. And so Spartacus gets to stand up. And as he gets to stand up, someone else stands up and says, I am Spartacus. And someone else stands up and says, I am Spartacus. Now, what's that got to do with today? I'll tell you what, I'm not in the RMT, but today I am in the RMT. Because actually, if the RMT win, they're not just fighting for themselves, they're fighting for every single working class person. So the task in the next few months is solidarity with the RMT, solidarity with every other group of workers that are fighting, and unity between trade unions and community organisations.
United will never be defeated.
Yay!
Would you like to add anything, or
I
get
think Paul covered that very well. You said something about a race card, and I didn't quite catch that.
I mean, basically, whenever the Tories are in trouble, they try and scapegoat. Same as the Nazi Germany blamed the Jews, the Tories will blame black people and people of colour. Yeah. So with the Nationality Act, with the thing about Rwanda and everything else.
Thank you. Do we have, we'll go to Jelen and then we'll go to Oktay.
I'm a bit closer so I don't have the yell. I actually have 2 questions, but I'll keep it super short.
Okay, so for Delia, I wanted to ask, so last month there was an immigration raid on a courier who had suspiciously taken strike action a week earlier for their conditions in Dalston. This happened last month. And you know, it just seems like there's increasing number of methods for the authorities, the government and the police to target workers, especially those from migrant backgrounds and UAE backgrounds. So I guess I just wanted to ask, how is it, with like our right to protest being attacked as well with the policing bill, and you know, migrants being attacked with the Nationality and Borders Bill, how can migrant workers and BAME workers continue to stand up for their rights safely, and why is it important that they should? And for Mel, I just wanted to ask, so I don't know if you've heard, a few months ago we set up, along with Unite, a migrant food and retail workers branch, because obviously there's a gap in unions addressing the needs of migrants and BAME communities. So obviously that's been an amazing initiative with Unite, but there's issues with other non-general unions that don't have the worker power to push for these kind of changes and push for these kind of policies from their unions. And I just wanted to ask, for someone like me who has a union, who I won't name, but is not very active and not very caring about their workers in some senses, how is it possible for us to organise and demand from our unions to take steps to address these issues? Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll hear from our speakers and then we'll go to the last question if there isn't going to be any others after that.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I didn't hear about the issue in Dalston with the immigration turning up, but did you see what happened in Peckham a couple of weeks ago? Because the immigration turned up, but so did the community, and the community won. This is what we have to do. This is what we have to do. We have to, because listen, they've threatened us with this police bill, and I've said this a number of times. Some of us are going to have to be prepared to get locked up, because there's some of us that they're going to target, and that's just a given. I can't sit down in fear of what might happen to me and see my community being inflicted with racism and fascism. So if the end result is I'm going to get locked up, then so be it. I think as a community, we are powerful and we are strong. And we've seen time and time again, when the community says no to the government with these immigration vans, we win. And they have to go away empty-handed. And we just have to be, I suppose we need to be, really have great networks where we can message each other really quickly. And say, if that happened here, you know, I'm quite sure we'd be quite safe around these parts. I know if it happened in certain parts in Enfield, I know that the community would turn out, and that's what we've got to have to do. We just got to have to do it. I don't think we should give away our rights. For hundreds of years we've been using protest. We can't give that up. We can't, because if we give that up, we're nowhere. And what are we saying to the younger generation? So we've got to show the youth. They came up with these laws to try and stop us, but this is what we did to combat it. And that's really the answer.
Greeting, comrade. Just to quickly explain and to get to your answer, you will have your branch meetings, sometimes you have regional council meetings, sometimes you'll have motions that go through to your branches, sometimes you'll have conferences. So there are constraints on each one, and I'm really sorry because Delia knows I hate bureaucracy. I've had a voice from before I became, these titles under the bureaucracy of my union. But I've done it because I do the work and I want to change things. So, for instance, in our branch meetings, we're very, very fortunate. We'll put motions in to affiliate with community organisations to deal with stuff. Notoriously, you'll have the people on the top table, sorry, I'm going to say the truth, that they use this term, industrial matters only. Well, it's not about industrial matters only, and that's why you have your equality branches of your union. It's because we understand that we've got to be in touch with our community because we are the community, right? So we always make sure that we'll have people that will come and speak. We have big budgets. Every union's got a budget where they can motion to the branches, and it won't be just one branch. Our union has loads of branches. Also, we've got the convenience now of Zoom. So if someone's in London, they can, connect with someone in Bristol, Liverpool, all these branches to also campaign for some money and support, and also put these interests out there. Also, my committee also has a Sunday International Solidarity meeting. So again, our issues are very, very international. They're global. We don't just stick with just the community. It's a very wide international solidarity that we have, and we keep that going every single Sunday. So in order to get the things that you want, there's a bit of bureaucracy that you have to go around and know the limitations of each part of your union, but you can get around it because there's different parts that can get through and cut through the mustard to get more community involvement, to help out, whatever the local issues might be. Thank you.
You can add to that as well, because what we used to do, I used to be in the PCS union, and there was a time when I was a bit rebellious and the bureaucracy wouldn't engage with us. And so we just used to organise meetings. You will always find, it doesn't matter the union, if it's Unison. Unison has got a really right-wing leadership, but there are key left-wing people that are involved in that bureaucracy that you need to tap into. Most unions have that. Organise a meeting, get some people from your union, get some big-name speakers there, and that will kind of move them. Especially if you promote it properly, you get lots of people in the room. You've got enough contacts in Day-Mer. You know a lot of people. So just organise something, and then they may come to you.
Thank you very much for that. And then we'll go to the last question, Oktay.
Well, just a couple of quick words. And I know Paul mentioned about all different industries and sectors who are on strike. I mean, one of the things that I was pleased to hear this week about some of the BA workers who are now striking and who are taking the strike action. And these are mainly people who work in the check-in, who've actually had a 10% pay cut during the pandemic. And when everyone else was offered a 10% pay rise, they were kind of left out of this. And this is what it's really good to hear that those sort of workers who are now standing up for their rights and taking strike action. I think we are sensing that in lots of different industries, and I think there's a very clear reason, and Paul definitely mentioned some of that. We're kind of hearing now in hospitals, they are setting things like food banks so that the nurses can actually take some of their needs and stuff like that. And I think people are seeing this, and people understand the importance of some of these key workers and what they do for us. Now, I kind of want to mention in particular the sector that I work in. I'm a secondary school teacher, and And I think last week it was a challenge for lots of our members, lots of our friends, colleagues to get into work. I mean, I think on Wednesday it took me about 3 hours to get to work. But I think what we were saying, every single one of the teachers were saying in the school how they were in solidarity with our MT workers despite those challenges. And I think as some of the previous speakers mentioned, I think that kind of shows us the change of mood. And I think what that should do is that should give us the mood to kind of go out there and try and organize. And I think one of the key messages that needs to come out from this meeting is that all of us have to join the trade union. I think it shouldn't just be down to a Google search about people joining the union, but we, as you know, people from BME communities, people who are campaigners, we need to kind of promote that within our communities. And I think that message needs to go out, because there is a battle, and that battle is coming, you know, it's around the corner. And I think one of the things that we need to do is to be organized. And I think at the moment those community organizations, those trade unions are placed best to be, because as Delia said, because there isn't the political representation out there. Which kind of takes me to my question to Delia and to Mel. Yes, there isn't a political representation over there. It's quite clear. I mean, we've heard Keir Starmer quite clearly saying that if any of his front bench work, shadow ministers go to a picket, you know, they'll be suspended, this, that, whatever. But there was still, it was quite clear that there were some of the Labour Party MPs who were on picket lines. You know, who were on picket lines, who were supporting those people on strike. But doesn't that kind of raise the question around, yes, there should be a third way, there should be an alternative, but shouldn't that now kind of raise the question about building an alternative political representation? You know, I know, Delia, you've been around a long time, and you've talked about the campaign that we did in Edmonton Green. But shouldn't that now give us the confidence? We've got the trade unions, we've got the campaign groups, we've got the community groups. Shouldn't that now give us the confidence to try and build something over there? You know, shouldn't we start looking into that? And I know Mick Lynch has been quite clear about Labour Party, but Mel, what is your sense in terms of Labour Party, and how is that perceived within RMT, especially their recent actions?
Yeah.
We are fully support all strike, especially RMT strike and Day-Mer. My question is to RMT actually. As you know, there is a national borders bill, is a bill now, and I know there is a campaign group against policing bill and nationality and borders bill. But what about trade union? I just wonder, are trade unionists doing something about it? And you mentioned that there's a 40% of black and ethnic minority on the underground or rail station, so they are all background from migrants. And the nationality and borders bill is a second class. They are putting us on second class citizenship. And I'm not afraid of myself. I'm afraid of my, for example, young generation like Dilan or my son, or you know, especially if they are active politically in the future. Probably they might want to get rid of them and send to their mothers or fathers' country, even though they feel that this is the country, this is the home country for them. So I'm very disgraceful for that bill, and I just wonder what is the RMT or other trade union situation. Are they gonna do something about it? What do they think about it? Thank you.
Anyone want to go first, and we'll make this the last one?
Yeah, I'll go first and just say, in terms of the third way, absolutely I want to see something happen. I don't think the answer to any of our issues is in Parliament. It's failed us. It's like a failed project. So it's time to do something else now, and more people are saying this. Very Cornwall, and I expected it to be like over there, is largely and Greens. It was so mixed, but the main parties didn't really. I said earlier, we cannot. I don't know. We want that to happen. We've been asking them to get involved, and you'll get like people from the bureaucracy, but they won't bring the members with them, and that has been a huge concern. So I don't know what the answer is. I want them to get involved.
Thank you again, Comrade, for your comments. Just quickly, just to say, I was very, very fortunate to meet Larissa Kennedy. She's the president of the NUS. and she messaged me on Tuesday to say there's a media attempt to pit students against the RMT because some students are struggling to get to their exams. We put out a statement, but I wanted to ask if there are pickets in Croydon. So I'm cutting the rest of the message short, but I'm saying that it only takes one. It takes a leadership, a person who is, on the solidarity strongly to actually put this message forward and to keep that solidarity going. In terms of the Labour Party, Delia's going to laugh and everybody else is going to laugh. I'm still a member of the Labour Party at the moment, right? And I've been tempted to tear up that card many, many times, but I want to be very clear. She's working on it. We haven't, the RMT has not affiliated with the Labour Party. We used to be, and obviously that solidarity was built, from the beginning. But we've not affiliated with the Labour Party. But I want to be very clear. We believe the Labour Party and all their members should back the trade unions unequivocally. Yeah, and that is our stance. That has always been our stance. I wanted to, quickly go to my comrade here. When what happened to the P&O workers happened, unfortunately, there was a narrative that was put out, not only just by the media, but from our own union, right? And immediately, my comrades can tell you, as the secretary, I put out a complaint immediately because we're not putting workers against workers, and we're also not going to put, people from... I would say black workers because I prefer to use the political term because we're all in the struggle. So I will use that because I don't like calling people migrants, except we know what we're talking about, but I don't like to use the term. In regards to the way the narrative was put out, it was, foreign workers coming to take over British people's jobs. Now, that wasn't true. Now, we had leaked documents that proved that people were offered jobs legitimately. They were also warned that there was going to be a contentious situation that they were going to be walking into. But for someone who's coming over from somewhere that is not the UK, that literally gets to a situation where they're trying to feed their families and are also being exploited, it was up to us as the unions to protect those workers. They're workers regardless, right? So when you're afraid for your children, I'm afraid for my children also, in regards to the way the Nationality and Borders Bill now Act is out there. I've gone to the TUC Black Workers Conference, and we've put our points across from the union, from the black sections, and it's up to us to hold our union leadership to account so that when the narratives are being put out there, we are strong in leading against these causes. Delia knows when Delia wants us to come out for Kill the Bill, she'll call the black section. She's not going through the head office to this person and that person, because you won't see them at these demos, right? And again, this is not me, disrespecting anybody or anything, but we've got to lead on our issues, right? We've got to get out there and make sure that we are protecting our own and we are putting our narratives out there the way that we do feel. Someone in a leadership role might not understand the same thing, and I'm not gaslighting. They won't put your issues on our issues first before anything else. And our solidarity and our own laws, everything that the Tory government has put through is here to destroy us as people and our rights to be able to just live how we're supposed to be able to live. If they go to our countries, they're fine. We should be fine too. So in terms of what you feel, we feel it too, and we're always going to fight for what is right for our people. But yeah, the bureaucracy is not going to do it. We need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. So just again, another thank you to Delia and Mel for joining us here today, and hopefully we see you both on Sunday at the park where we can have a little bit of fun. And thank you to everyone that's joined us here today. That is it from me. Thank you.